former Labour MP and Cryer said that there were councillors and MPs all over the country who knew what was going on but were terrified of being labelled racist. A national inquiry would ask if there was a racial or cultural motivation to some of these crimes where white girls were seen, as Jack Straw said, as easy meat.
Mr. Speaker, when I was Chief Prosecutor, I took measures to confront this head on.
Mr. Speaker, we need to focus on what this is really about. This is not about the Prime Minister's work in the CPS. And I would say very respectfully to the Prime Minister, it's not about you. It is about the victims. Be a leader, not a lawyer. The Labour Party has adopted the APPG definition of Islamophobia. That same APPG report said talking about sex groomers was an example of Islamophobia. This is exactly why people are scared to tell the truth. So will the Prime Minister look again at the Labour Party's adoption of the definition of Islamophobia, its chilling effect, and rule out introducing it in government?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I will call out any aspect that has prevented anybody coming forward or any case going forward when it comes to violence against women and girls, child abuse or child sexual exploitation, as I have been doing now for the best part of 15 years.
Keir Starmer's response in this exchange reeks of performative politics and hollow virtue, signaling as he conveniently dodges the core of the issue while attempting to paint himself as a champion of justice. His repeated boasts about his tenure as chief prosecutor ring hollow when confronted with the glaring failures of the Crown Prosecution Service, PS during his watch to address child sexual exploitation in grooming gang cases. Starmer's vague and self-aggrandizing statements failed to acknowledge the systemic negligence and political cowardice that allowed such heinous crimes to proliferate. Instead of taking ownership or addressing the Labour Party's adoption of the APPG definition of Islamophobia, which has been criticized for stifling open dialogue on sensitive but critical issues, he skirts the question and reverts to platitudes about calling out injustice. This is classic Starmer, a man who prides himself on being a lawyer but fails to grasp the moral imperatives of leadership. His inability to decisively confront the cultural and racial dynamics underpinning grooming gang scandals, for fear of upsetting his political base, demonstrates a shocking lack of courage. Worse still, his dismissal of the real fears that many have about the chilling effect of the APPG definition on open discussion betrays his unwillingness to prioritize victims over political correctness. Starmer needs to understand that leadership is about making tough, uncomfortable choices for the greater good, not hiding behind his past titles and deflecting accountability. For someone who likes to present himself as a paragon of integrity, his failure to engage with the deep-seated issues at the heart of this scandal reveals a man far more concerned with optics than outcomes. His weak and evasive answers are an insult to the victims and their families, who deserve action and honesty, not another calculated performance from a politician who seems more lawyer than leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is being very specific because I have raised this issue. I've raised it in speeches. I've raised it publicly. He knows that as a minister, I would not have been speaking on this specific issue. I was not a Home Office minister, but Mr. Speaker, I will remind him about other victims who came to me who I did help. The victims of the Tavistock scandal who came to me as a minister. I didn't send them away like his safeguarding minister. I made sure, as his Labour Party were calling me transphobic, that we launched the CAS review, which even his health secretary has accepted. So we do right by victims, Mr. Speaker. The reason why a national inquiry is important is because this issue is systemic. It has been involving local and national officials, the police, prosecutors, and politicians. He talks about some of the local inquiries, but these interlinked issues cannot be covered by local inquiries alone. In fact, the leaders of the Manchester inquiry resigned because they couldn't get evidence, they couldn't summon witnesses, and not a single person in a position of authority has been held to account. The Prime Minister called for 9 inquiries in the last Parliament. Does he not see that by resisting this one, people will start to worry about a cover-up?
Mr. Speaker, this is an important issue, and we have to focus on the victims and survivors, and it isn't helpful. This sort of lies and misinformation and slinging of mud doesn't help them one bit. Doesn't help one bit. Mr. Speaker, she raised a question of a victim with me, quite right to, and I accept that victims and survivors are in different places on this. Those that I've spoken to are worried about the delay of a further inquiry. The last inquiry took 7 years. That would take us to 2031. Now, these inquiries, amongst the issues that's been raised with me, and she's been speaking to victims, they'll have raised this with her, is that it's very hard for victims and survivors to come forward to explain what's happened to them. They do not want to be rushed through this process, which is why the last one took 7 years. It's not sensible to suggest that this can be done in a hurry, on the cheap, and comprehensively. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, that would take us to, let's say, 2030, 2031. The victims that I've spoken to want action today. I agree with them on that. But what I don't understand, I genuinely don't understand, is why anybody today would vote against the Children Wellbeing Bill, which will protect children who are vulnerable today. It will kill the bill. It will stop those provisions for children exposed at risk today. I implore them, vote for the bill. Don't wreck this in this misguided way.
Keir Starmer's response in this exchange exemplifies his chronic inability to rise to the demands of true leadership as he retreats into a fog of bureaucratic excuses and self-righteous indignation. His dismissal of Kemi Badenoch's incisive critique as lies of misinformation and mudslinging reeks of desperation, a transparent attempt to deflect from the substance of her arguments. Instead of addressing the systemic failings Badenoch highlighted, including the resignation of inquiry leaders due to an inability to summon witnesses and the glaring absence of accountability among those in positions of authority, Starmer clings to the tired mantra of focusing on the victims. This hollow refrain, unaccompanied by any meaningful commitment to transparency or reform, is an insult to those who have suffered and a stark reminder of his political cowardice. Starmer's justification for rejecting a national inquiry, that it would take too long, is a pathetic excuse designed to mask his unwillingness to confront uncomfortable truths. His suggestion that victims would prefer immediate action, rather than the accountability and justice a comprehensive inquiry could provide, is both patronizing and disingenuous. Victims deserve both immediate safeguards and a thorough reckoning with the systemic failures that enabled their suffering. By framing the call for an inquiry as a choice between action now and justice later, Starmer reveals a lack of imagination and ambition unbecoming of someone aspiring to lead the nation. Furthermore, his bewilderment at opposition to the Children's Wellbeing Bill betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of the critique leveled against him. Badenoch's arguments were not about obstructing protections for children, but about the necessity of tackling the root causes of systemic failures. A conversation Starmer is clearly too timid to engage in. His feigned confusion and hollow rhetoric serve only to highlight his penchant for political posturing over meaningful solutions. Instead of addressing Badenoch's call for accountability, Starmer opts to condescend, deflect, and obfuscate, proving once again that he is more adept at dodging responsibility than delivering results. In the end, Starmer's performance is emblematic of a politician who prioritizes optics over substance, platitudes over action, and partisan attacks over genuine leadership. His reluctance to support a national inquiry, coupled with his dismissal of Badenoch's valid criticisms, sends a chilling message. When it comes to confronting systemic failures that impact the most vulnerable, Keir Starmer is more concerned with protecting his image than pursuing justice. This is not the mark of a leader. It is the mark of a politician out of his depth, hiding behind empty words, while victims and survivors continue to demand the accountability he is unwilling to deliver. Thanks for watching. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the content. Share your feedback in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with our latest videos. Also, join our free Telegram group link in the description for uncensored discussions on important issues.